Hi everybody. I wanted to give you guys a quick introduction on how to get started with this Polaroid watercolor project. And first we're going to talk about how to lay out your composition, how to select your photos, and some of the criteria you might want to think about. So what I've done is I started by looking through a lot of my photos. And my selection criteria were choosing places that were meaningful to me and choosing photos that had really interesting colors and some interesting shapes. So what I've done, I've made an album of these photos, which I highly suggest you do. And I started by selecting photos, and then I edited them to become a square. So each of our pieces are going to be a square composition. So these three photos are all from this tiny island, the Åland Islands. This is from Čekar, where I went on an artist in residency program 2 summers ago. And it was a really incredible experience that I'd like to remember and reminisce about. So that's why I selected these photos. These 2 photos are from a trip I took to Japan, and Japan is also one of my favorite places to visit. So these are from a garden in Shinjuku in Tokyo, and I've also edited these to become a square composition, and I really love the colors and the variety of textures in these, so that's why I selected these. And then these are some photos from my hometown. This is a photo of me and my mom and her dog. These are from New Mexico in the US. And this is from her house. And this is a view from her backyard. So I really love the skies and the sunsets in New Mexico, so that's why I selected these photos. I would suggest that your photos not focus on the human figure too much. I do suggest choosing things that have interesting colors, interesting shapes, interesting textures, but nothing too complex, because we're going to be working on kind of a small scale for this project. Yeah, and then these last 2 are, of course, in Korea. These are both from Bundang Central Park. So I also edited some of these a little bit to enhance the contrast and color. So this one is a little bit brighter and more saturated than the initial photo. So yeah, these are my selections. And we're going to choose a top 3. So I want maybe one of each place. I'm going to do this one, I think, and this one, and I think this one. So let's start with this one. And what I've been thinking about is sort of how to map out my composition. This is going to be a square composition, so I'm just going to use a Post-it note to sketch a perfect square, save a little time. And what I want to think about is the relative ratios of how much space each thing is taking up. So here, the horizon line is pretty much exactly in the center. Then this fence line is a bit below that. The figures are right on this thirds point. I'm sort of just trying to go by the ratios that I can see. The dog is sort of center bottom here. Figures are here. The tree shape is here. And of course, this is relatively straightforward. I'm just drawing from a photo. And I want to start off by just mapping out the basic shapes of the composition. There's this diagonal road here. And like I said, I'm always thinking about ratios. I always think about, where do these lines go off the edge of the page? What percentage does that take up? I think this is maybe a little bit high. Then this is a straight line that sort of converges this way. This road, this line. If you have perspective lines like this, all of these lines along here are actually going to go to the same vanishing point. So here's my horizon line. My vanishing point will be somewhere along this horizon line, but off my page. So if I imagine drawing this horizon line across, if this is a continuation of my picture, if I draw these lines continuing off my picture, it's where they would intersect. So see, if I continue these lines off the edge, where these lines come together is what's called the vanishing point. And I want to try to recreate that in my drawing. That's part of what gives me a sense of space, a sense of depth that is accurate to my image. So I want to try and make those perspective lines as real as possible. So yeah, I want to do this with each of my pieces to kind of figure out where the relative shapes are within the pieces. We're going to work about a little larger than Polaroid size. So we'll be working about 6 inches by 6 inches, which will be about like this. So they're relatively small paintings. You don't want to do something that has way too much detail. For example, I love this photo. I love Korean architecture, but I'm not going to be able to render all of these colors and details. So that's why I'm not selecting this photo. I do still get some interesting architectural elements here, but I think I'll be able to simplify this a little bit more easily than I would this image. So that's sort of a start to where we're headed. You want to select interesting photos that are meaningful to you. Obviously, they need to be photos you've taken. Photos you took. Meaningful. Think about color. Think about shape. Think about texture. And don't get too detailed. Okay? So that's what I want you to think about at the beginning of this project. Thanks. So here I am drawing from a different photo. I wanted to give you guys just a view of how I go into creating a final drawing like this. Again, I am using my pencil to kind of map out the various proportions and ratios of space. I use my pencil a lot to measure by sight how much space each object is taking up. I also pay close attention to the relative angles of things, thinking about the angle of the fence. It's about a 30-degree angle. Thinking about just measuring and looking at the relative spaces of each thing is the most important part here. You don't need to get incredibly detailed at this stage. You should be drawing light, but you should be as accurate as possible. And typically I like to turn my paper around as I'm drawing as well. It helps me. This is obviously sped up 4 times. This drawing took me about 10 minutes. Yours will probably take a bit longer than that, and you may want to get a little bit more detailed than this. So make sure to take your time with this drawing and be as accurate as you possibly can, but not too dark. Good luck.